The winter of 1876 came to Wyoming like a white wolf with its teeth bared, silent and merciless. 3 feet of snow had already fallen by December, and the drifts piled higher than a man on horseback, the kind of cold that turned breath to ice before it left your lips, the kind that made the cattle huddle together like mourners at a funeral, their backs crusted with frost. Eleanor Hayes didn't see the flames at first. She smelled them, that acrid bite of burning pine and cloth that pulled her from fevered sleep. Her body, already weak from 3 days of pneumonia, responded slowly. Too slowly. By the time her eyes focused, orange light was already dancing on the ceiling beams of the small cabin she'd called home for 7 years. "Clara!" She screamed, her voice raw and breaking. "Thomas, girls!" The smoke hit her lungs like a fist, black, choking, thick as tar. She rolled from the bed, hitting the floor hard, her nightgown already singed at the hem. The heat pressed down from above a living thing with weight and hunger. Through the chaos, she heard it, the sound that would haunt her for the rest of her days. Nothing. No crying children, no screams, just the roar of flames eating everything she'd ever loved. She crawled toward the children's room, her hands blistering on the hot floorboards. The doorway was a rectangle of hell flames licking up both sides like the gates to perdition itself. She tried to stand to run through, but a beam crashed down, catching her shoulder and spinning her backward. Pain exploded white-hot across her vision. "Please, God," she whispered, her words swallowed by the inferno. "Not my babies. Take me instead." The roof began to cave. She had seconds, maybe less. With strength born of desperation, she threw herself toward the window, using a chair to shatter the glass. The cold hit her like salvation and damnation combined. She tumbled into the snow, her nightgown on fire, rolling frantically until the flames died. Then she lay there, skin steaming in the frozen air, watching her world burn. The cabin collapsed inward with a sound like the earth breaking. Sparks rose into the black sky like souls ascending, and Eleanor Hayes, 32 years old, widow mother and former battlefield nurse, felt something inside her break so completely that she wondered if she'd ever been whole at all. But the human body is a stubborn thing. Even when the spirit wants to die, flesh keeps breathing. She pushed herself up, ice forming instantly on her burned skin, and that's when she saw them. Footprints in the snow, small ones, child-sized, leading away from the cabin toward the tree line. Clara. Her voice was barely human, scorched by smoke. Thomas. She followed those prints like a woman possessed, crawling when she couldn't walk, dragging herself through drift that came up to her chest. Her nightgown, wet and frozen, became armor of ice. Blood from her shoulder left a trail of red in the white like someone had drawn a line between the living and the dead. A mile out, maybe more, she collapsed. The cold had stopped hurting, which she knew meant death was close. The footprints continued on, but her body had nothing left. She lay face down in a drift, ready to let the white wolf of winter take her when she heard it, the sound of a rifle being cocked. She managed to turn her head. Through ice-crusted lashes, she saw him. A figure emerged from the swirling snow like something from a dream or nightmare. Tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a bear fur coat that made him look more beast than man. He moved differently than most men, carefully, deliberately, like someone who'd learned not to trust the world's sounds. Samuel McBride had been hunting that cursed grizzly for 3 weeks. The one that had taken 2 calves and spooked his horses so bad, one had run itself into barbed wire. He'd followed its tracks up the mountain passes, through forests so thick the snow barely reached the ground. He was tired cold and ready to give up when he saw the smoke rising from the valley below. Then he found her, a woman more ice than flesh blood pooling beneath her in the snow. Her lips were moving, but no sound came out. He knelt beside her, and that's when he saw her eyes, gray-green like sage in summer, filled with the kind of desperation he'd seen before. on battlefields, in field hospitals, the eyes of someone who'd lost everything but couldn't stop fighting. He touched her face gently, and her eyes focused on him. Her mouth moved again, and this time he read the words on her lips. "My children." Sam looked up, following her gaze to the footprints. 4 sets, if he counted right. He looked back at her, and something passed between them in that moment. Recognition, maybe, though he couldn't place from where. He pulled off his bear coat and wrapped it around her, the warmth of it making her cry out. Then he lifted her into his arms. She weighed nothing like a bird with hollow bones. "The children," she managed to whisper. He nodded once, adjusting her weight. He'd track those prints. He'd find them. But first, he had to keep this woman alive, because something in those sage-green eyes told him their stories were meant to cross. That maybe in this frozen hell at the edge of the world, 2 broken people might find something worth saving. As he carried her through the snow, Eleanor's head lolled against his chest. Through her delirium, she smelled something familiar beneath the bear fur and winter air, gunpowder and pipe tobacco, the same combination she'd smelled in a field hospital in Pennsylvania 13 years ago, when she'd saved a young soldier's life by the light of cannon fire. But that was impossible. That soldier was dead. Everyone from those days was dead. The war had taken them all one way or another. Still, as consciousness slipped away, she could have sworn she heard that same soldier's voice humming a tune she hadn't heard since Gettysburg, a song about finding your way home through the dark. Wyoming Territory in 1876 was God's own contradiction, beautiful enough to break your heart, harsh enough to stop it beating. The Medicine Bow Mountains rose like the spine of some slumbering giant, their peaks wrapped in clouds that never quite lifted. Below them, the valley stretched for miles, a canvas of white in winter gold in summer, and the kind of endless that made men either find God or lose him entirely. The nearest town, Sage Creek, sat 15 miles from anywhere that mattered, a collection of wooden buildings that leaned on each other like drunks after a 3-day bender. It had 1 saloon, 1 church, 1 general store, and enough gossip to fill all 3 twice over. The kind of place where everyone knew your business before you did, and judgment came faster than spring rain. Samuel McBride's ranch sat even further out, pressed against the mountain's base like it was hiding from civilization. Or maybe civilization was hiding from it. 700 acres of stubborn land that fought you for every fence post, every head of cattle, every single day you tried to make a life on it. The cabin was built from logs Sam had cut himself, chinked with mud, and moss roofed with cedar shakes that sang in the wind. It wasn't pretty, but it stood strong like the man who'd built it. Sam himself was 35 years old, though the war had added decades to his eyes. 6 feet, 2 inches of quiet strength, with hands scarred from rope and wire shoulders broad enough to carry grief without buckling. His hair, dark as coffee, hung just past his collar, not from vanity, but from forgetting to cut it. He had a face that might have been handsome once before a Confederate shell had taken most of the hearing in his left ear and left a scar that ran from temple to jaw. The deafness had come slow at first, just a ringing that wouldn't stop. Then words started disappearing, swallowed by a cotton-thick silence that grew worse each year. By the time he'd come to Wyoming 5 years back, he'd learned to read lips better than most men read books. He'd developed a way of watching the world that made people nervous, too intense, too careful, like he was memorizing everything for some future test. He lived alone by choice and necessity both. The war had taken his hearing, but the cholera had taken everything else. Mary, little James, both buried in Missouri soil while he was driving cattle to Kansas, trying to earn enough for medicine that came too late. He'd sold everything after that headed west, until he hit mountains big enough to match his grief. Eleanor Hayes had her own ghosts, though she wore them differently. Where Sam turned inward, she turned outward, pouring herself into others, until there was nothing left for herself. Before the fire, she'd been the closest thing to a Dr. Sage Creek, had though no university would ever give a woman that title. She'd learned her trade in blood and screaming in field hospitals where the choice was learn fast or watch men die faster. She was 32, with hair the color of autumn wheat when the sun hit it right. Not beautiful in the classical sense. Her nose had been broken once and set slightly crooked. Her hands were too rough from lye soap and carbolic acid, and she had a scar across her palm from her first surgery when she'd gripped a scalpel too tight while amputating a sergeant's leg. But she had those eyes, gray-green and deep as mountain lakes' eyes that had seen too much but somehow still hoped for better. Her husband, William Hayes, had been dead 4 years now. Or so she'd thought. He'd been one of Sam's regiment, actually, though neither knew it yet. A charming quartermaster who could talk his way into or out of anything. He'd courted Eleanor with stolen medical supplies as love tokens, morphine for the hospital, quinine for the fever ward. She'd married him thinking she loved him, realized too late she'd only loved the idea of being loved. After the war, they'd headed west like so many others, chasing gold dreams and free land. William had tried farming, failed. Tried mining, failed. Tried gambling, and succeeded just enough to fail spectacularly. He'd left one morning for Denver, promising to return with fortune enough for a new start. The letter saying he'd died of fever came 6 months later, along with gambling debts that took everything except the small cabin and the clothes on their backs. Eleanor had survived by nursing, midwifing, and sheer will. She'd raised her 4 children on prairie grass and prayer-darning socks until there was more thread than sock-stretching soup, until it was more hope than sustenance. But they'd been happy, those children. Lord, they'd been happy. Clara, 9 years old, serious as a judge with her mother's gray eyes and her father's stubborn chin. She read everything she could get her hands on, including a medical textbook Eleanor had saved from the war. The girl could set a broken bone better than most grown men. Thomas 7, all knees and elbows, and questions that never stopped. Why do stars blink, Mama? How come water freezes but blood don't? If God made everything, who made God? He had his father's charm, but his mother's heart, always bringing home injured birds and 3-legged dogs. The twins, Ruth and Rose, 5 years old and identical, except Ruth had a birthmark, like a crescent moon on her shoulder. They spoke their own language, sometimes finishing each other's sentences, laughing at jokes nobody else understood. They'd been born during a blizzard worse than this one coming into the world, holding hands, and they'd stayed that way ever since. These were the children whose footprints led into the forest. These were the souls Eleanor would have traded her own to save. The man who'd set the fire, Jasper Hayes, had claimed to be William's brother. He'd shown up 2 months ago with legal papers and whiskey breath, saying the land belonged to him now. Said William had promised it in exchange for old debts. Eleanor had thrown him out with her husband's rifle pointed at his chest, but he'd kept coming back. Each time uglier than the last. A woman alone ain't fit to raise children, he'd said the last time standing in her doorway while the children hid behind her skirts. They need a man's guidance, a firm hand. Get off my land, she'd told him, cocking the rifle. He'd smiled, then the kind of smile that made her skin crawl. Your land. We'll see about that, sister. We'll just see. That was 3 days ago. Before the fever took her, before the fire, before everything went to hell. Now in Sam's cabin she drifted in and out of consciousness while he worked on her wounds. The shoulder was dislocated, bruised, purple-black, where the beam had struck. Her hands were burned, blistered raw. Frostbite had taken 2 toes, for certain maybe 3, but she'd live. Sam had seen enough death to know when someone was too stubborn for it. He'd built up the fire until the cabin was almost too warm, laid her on his own bed, covered her with every blanket he owned. Then he'd done something he hadn't done in 5 years. He'd talked to her. She couldn't hear him, unconscious as she was, but he talked anyway. I'm going after them, he said, pulling on his coat. Those children, I'll find them. You stay alive. You hear me? You stay alive." He'd started to leave, then stopped. Something about her face in the firelight, something familiar. He stepped closer, studied the scar on her palm, and memory hit him like a physical blow. Pennsylvania, 1863. A field hospital in a barn with half its roof blown off. A young nurse with gray-green eyes who'd worked for 16 hours straight to save his life when infection had set in after Gettysburg. "My God," he whispered, "Eleanor." But she couldn't answer, couldn't confirm what he suddenly knew with certainty, that the woman in his bed was the same one who'd held his hand while fever tried to take him, who'd sung hymns to keep him fighting when the pain got too bad to bear, the one he'd promised to find after the war, before the world had other plans. Outside, snow began falling again, thick and fast. The children's footprints were already half-filled, soon to be erased entirely. Sam grabbed his rifle, a lantern, and headed into the white darkness. Behind him, Eleanor murmured something in her sleep, a name maybe, or a prayer. The wind howled like something grieving, and somewhere in those frozen woods, 4 children were learning what it meant to be truly alone. But Samuel McBride was coming for them, carrying more than just a lantern through the dark. He was carrying a debt 13 years old, a chance at redemption, and maybe, just maybe, the possibility that broken things could still be made whole. The fever took Eleanor back 13 years to a barn in Pennsylvania where the air tasted of blood and gunpowder. She was 19 then, her hands still soft from a life of piano lessons and needlework in Boston. The war had changed that, changed everything. She'd followed her father, Dr. Marcus Whitfield, to the front lines despite his protests. "This is no place for a lady," he'd said. But when the wounded started coming in faster than anyone could count, when boys younger than her brother died, calling for their mothers, the definition of lady got rewritten in blood and necessity. The barn at Gettysburg was hell's own waiting room. 200 men laid out on hay that turned red beneath them, their screams creating a symphony of suffering that never stopped, not even at night, especially not at night. That's when the dying really started, when bodies gave up fighting and souls slipped away quiet as thieves. She'd been working on her 20th amputation when they brought him in. Samuel McBride, though she didn't know his name then. Just another sergeant with a bullet in his shoulder that had gone bad infection, spreading black lines up his neck like poison ivy. The field surgeons had already written him off. Too far gone, too many others who might actually survive. But something in his eyes stopped her. Even burning with fever, they watched everything with an intensity that suggested a mind refusing to quit, even as his body failed. When she'd leaned over to check his wound, he'd grabbed her wrist with surprising strength. "Don't," he'd whispered. "Don't waste the morphine." "I'm not wasting anything," she'd told him, preparing the injection anyway. "Others need it more." "Others aren't my patient right now. You are." She'd worked on him through the night, while battles raged 5 miles away, close enough that the windows rattled with each cannon blast. She'd cut out the infected tissue by lamplight, packed the wound with honey and whiskey, an old remedy her grandmother had taught her that the proper doctors scoffed at. She'd sat with him through 3 nights of delirium when he called out for Mary, for James' names she'd assumed were family back home. On the 4th morning his fever broke. He'd opened those dark eyes focused on her face and said, "You sang hymns. You were dying. It seemed appropriate." "No," he'd said, almost smiling. "You sang them wrong, completely wrong melody." She'd laughed, then the first real laugh since she'd arrived at the front. "Well, Sergeant, next time you're dying, feel free to correct my pitch." "Sam," he'd said. "My name is Sam. And there won't be a next time. I owe you that much." They'd talked during his recovery-stolen moments between rounds. He told her about his farm in Missouri, about Mary waiting for him, about baby James, who'd been born while he was at Antietam. She told him about Boston, about following her father against everyone's advice, about wanting to be a real doctor someday when the world stopped being insane. After the war, he'd said the day before his unit moved out, "I'll find you, write to you at least." After the war, she'd agreed, knowing how many promises died with the men who made them. She'd given him the medical textbook she'd been studying, inscribed with her name and her father's practice address in Boston. He'd given her his mother's prayer book, said it had kept him safe this far. Maybe it would do the same for her. She never saw him again. The war ended, but her father didn't survive it. Typhoid 3 days before Lee's surrender. She'd returned to Boston to find her mother remarried. Her home, sold, her place in society evaporated. That's when William Hayes had appeared charming and full of promises about Western opportunities. She'd married him partly for escape, partly from exhaustion, mostly because he was there and everyone else was gone. Now, thrashing in Sam's bed, Eleanor's fever mixed past and present into a kaleidoscope of loss. She saw her father's hands teaching her to suture on pigskin, saw William's face the last morning promising fortune but delivering abandonment, saw her children around the dinner table just 3 nights ago, Ruth and Rose arguing over who got the last piece of cornbread while Clara mediated with Supreme Court seriousness. "Mama, tell Thomas to stop looking at me." "I'm not looking at you, I'm looking through you." "You're see-through 'cause you're so skinny." "Children, please." The memories shattered like glass, each shard cutting deeper than the last. The fire. God, the fire. Jasper's face in the window just before the flames started that smile that promised nothing good. The sound of breaking glass from the children's room, not from heat, she realized now, but from escape. They'd gotten out. Her babies had gotten out. Meanwhile, Sam tracked through the Wyoming darkness following ghosts of footprints. The snow had stopped leaving a crystalline world lit by a moon so bright it cast shadows blue as bruises. The children's trail led into the deep woods toward the old trapper's territory, where even desperate men didn't go in winter. As he walked, he remembered his own ghosts. Mary's face when he'd come home from the war, trying to smile through her sickness. "You're back," she had said, like she'd been holding death off just to see him once more. Little James, barely 3, burning with fever in his arms, while Sam sang the same hymns Eleanor had sung wrong all those years ago. He'd buried them both in a single day, the ground so hard from frost, it took 6 hours to dig one grave. The cholera had come while he was gone, driving cattle to Kansas because the army pension wasn't enough. He'd left them healthy, came back to Crosses. The neighbor woman who had helped nurse them said Mary had called for him at the end, said she'd waited as long as she could. That's when the real deafness started, not from the war wound, though that was part of it, but from the silence that comes when everyone you want to hear is gone. He'd started losing words, then sentences, then whole conversations. It was easier that way. If you couldn't hear the world, maybe you couldn't hurt from it either. He'd sold everything, headed west, until he found land empty enough to match how he felt inside. Built his cabin with his own hands like he could construct walls thick enough to keep the memories out. For 5 years, it had worked. He'd become the mountain man people in Sage Creek whispered about. The one who'd gone strange from grief, who talked to horses because they didn't talk back, who'd forgotten how to be human. Until tonight. Until he'd seen Eleanor Hayes dying in the snow and recognized not just her face, but her spirit. That same refusal to quit he'd seen in a field hospital when she'd fought death for his soul and won. The tracks suddenly multiplied, became chaotic. The children had run here, scattered, come back together. There was blood on a tree trunk, small, handprint-sized. Sam's jaw tightened. Then he heard it. Or felt it more like the vibration through the ground that his damaged ears could still detect. Growling. He came around a massive pine and stopped. There, in a small clearing, lit silver by moonlight, was a scene from a nightmare. A grizzly bear, the same one he'd been hunting, stood on its hind legs at the mouth of a cave. At its feet lay a man's body torn apart, unrecognizable, except for the fancy coat Jasper Hayes had been known to wear. But in the cave, mouth pressed against the back wall, were 4 children. The oldest girl stood in front, holding a burning branch from some long-dead fire, waving it at the bear whenever it moved closer. The boy held 2 smaller girls behind him, their identical faces blank with terror. Sam raised his rifle, but the angle was wrong. Any shot might hit the children. He needed to draw the bear away. Without thinking, he did something that would have seemed insane to any witness. He started singing. Loud off-key, the same hymn Eleanor had sung wrong 13 years ago. The bear turned confused by this new sound. That's when Sam saw the girl's face clearly in the moonlight. Clara. She looked just like Eleanor had at 19, that same determination to protect what mattered, even if it killed her. She saw him too, and for a moment their eyes met across the clearing. He motioned with his hand. "Stay back, stay quiet." The bear, 800 pounds of hunger and rage, started toward him. Sam backed up slowly, still singing, leading it away from the cave. When he had enough distance, when the angle was right, he fired. Once, twice. The bear dropped, shaking the ground, its blood black in the moonlight. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the little one started crying, and Sam realized he could hear it. Actually hear it. Not clearly, not fully. But something, like the sound, had forced its way through whatever wall his grief had built. He approached the cave, slowly, hands visible the way you'd approach spooked horses. Clara still held the burning branch, trembling now that the danger had passed. "Your mother," Sam said carefully. "She's alive. She sent me." "Mama," the boy whispered. "She's hurt, but alive. I'm taking you to her." Clara studied his face with eyes too old for 9 years. "You're the man from the mountain, the one who doesn't talk to nobody. I'm talking now." "Why?" Sam looked at these 4 children, orphaned by violence, saved by chance, standing in a cave that smelled of death and terror. He thought of Eleanor fighting fever in his cabin. He thought of promises made in field hospitals and families lost to distance and disease. "Because," he said finally, "sometimes the world gives you a second chance at keeping a promise, even if it takes 13 years to come around." He wrapped the children in his coat, carried the twins while Clara and Thomas walked beside him. As they left the clearing, Clara looked back at Jasper's body. "He said he was our uncle, said he had rights to us." "He lied," Sam said simply. "I know." Clara said, her voice steady as winter stone. "That's why I led him here. I knew about the bear. Everyone knows about the bear." Sam stopped walking, looked down at this 9-year-old girl who just confessed to murder with the calmness of discussing weather. That's a heavy thing to carry. "Mama says we all carry what we must," Clara replied. "And sometimes, to protect what we love, we do things that change us forever." As they walked through the snow, toward home, toward Eleanor, toward whatever came next, Sam realized the girl was right. Some things changed you forever. War, loss, love. And sometimes, if you were very lucky or very cursed, you got the chance to choose which change defined you. Behind them, the cave stood empty except for shadows and the kind of secrets that mountains keep forever. Dawn came to the Medicine Bow Mountains like a cautious visitor, pink and gold, creeping over the peaks as if afraid to wake something sleeping. Sam carried the twins through the door of his cabin. Just as that first light touched the windows, their small bodies limp with exhaustion against his chest. Claire and Thomas followed, moving like sleepwalkers, their feet mechanical and eyes hollow. Eleanor was awake. Somehow, through fever and pain, she dragged herself to the window where she pressed her face against the cold glass, watching the tree line. When the door opened when she saw them, the sound that came from her throat wasn't quite human. Part sob, part prayer, part resurrection. "My babies," she whispered, trying to stand, failing, catching herself on the windowsill. "My babies, my babies, my babies." The children flew to her, even exhausted as they were. Ruth and Rose climbed into her lap, Despite her burned hands, Thomas pressed his face against her shoulder, and Clara, responsible Clara, stood close enough to touch, but held back, studying her mother's injuries with those two wise eyes. "You're hurt bad, Mama." "I'm alive," Eleanor said, running her bandaged hands over each child, counting heads, checking faces, making sure they were real. "That's all that matters. The man from the mountain saved us," Thomas said, his voice muffled against her nightgown. "He killed the bear that was eating Uncle Jasper." Eleanor's eyes found Sam's across the room. He stood by the door, uncomfortable now in his own home, watching this reunion like a man watching through a window at something he couldn't have. "Uncle Jasper," she asked carefully. "He wasn't really our uncle," Clara said, her voice flat. "He's dead now." The weight of that statement hung in the air. Eleanor pulled Clara closer, understanding passing between mother and daughter without words. Some truth didn't need speaking. Some burdens were carried silent. "Children," Eleanor said softly, "this is Mr. McBride. He's an old friend from before, from the war." Sam stepped forward then, and in the morning light, Eleanor saw him clearly for the first time. The scar along his jaw she'd stitched by candlelight. The way he held his head slightly tilted. The left ear she remembered where the shell had hit. His hands, once smooth from handling ledgers and rifles, now rough from ranch work. But his eyes were the same. Dark, intense, carrying grief like a second skeleton. "Hello again, Eleanor," he said quietly. "Hello, Sam." The children looked between them, sensing something beyond their understanding. Finally, Rose, the bolder twin, asked, "Did you know our daddy, too?" Sam nodded slowly. "I knew him. We served together." "He died," Ruth said matter-of-factly. "In Denver, from fever." Sam's eyes met Eleanor's, a question there. She gave the slightest shake of her head. "Not now. Not yet." "I'm sorry for your loss," he said formally. "That was 4 years ago," Thomas announced. "We're used to it now." But children are never used to loss, Sam thought. They just learn to carry it younger than they should. He busied himself making breakfast. Cornmeal, mush salt, pork coffee for the adults, milk from his one cow for the children. They ate in relative silence, everyone adjusting to this new configuration of souls. Eleanor couldn't manage the spoon with her bandaged hands, and without thinking, Sam moved to help her. She pulled back, at first pride flaring, then necessity won, and she let him feed her like a child. "Your hands will heal," he said quietly. "Few weeks, maybe less. You were lucky." "Lucky," she repeated, looking at her burned home's direction through the window. "Yes, I suppose I was." After breakfast, Sam examined her wounds properly in daylight. The shoulder would heal, clean the burns, would scar, but not cripple. The frostbite had taken 2 small toes, but she'd walk normal once the rest healed. He worked with surprising gentleness, his rough hands careful as lamb's wool. "You learned medicine," Eleanor observed. "Necessity taught me. Lost too many cattle to not knowing. Figured people weren't that different." "They are, though," she said. "People are entirely different." "How so?" "Cattle don't choose to hurt each other, don't burn each other's homes, don't come in the night with papers saying they own what isn't theirs." Sam paused in his work, meeting her eyes. "No. But they also don't save strangers in field hospitals, don't sing hymns wrong to keep men fighting, don't walk through fire for their young." Eleanor felt heat rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with fever. "You remember the hymns." "I remember everything about those 4 days. They kept me alive more than once when living didn't seem worth the trouble." "And Mary?" she asked carefully. "Your wife?" His hand stilled. "Gone. Cholera. 5 years back." "Your boy?" "Same day, actually. I was in Kansas selling cattle to pay for medicine that didn't matter anyway." "Sam, I'm so sorry." He resumed working, wrapping fresh bandages around her hands. "Your turn. William." Eleanor looked at her children, all four now exploring Sam's cabin with the resilience only young ones possessed. Clara was examining his bookshelf. Thomas was staring fascinated at a bear skull on the mantel. The twins were petting his old hound dog, who'd wandered in from the barn. "Can we speak alone?" she asked. They stepped onto the porch, Eleanor wrapped in Sam's huge coat, him in just his shirt despite the cold. The morning sun made the snow sparkle like scattered diamonds, beautiful and cold as truth. "William didn't die of fever," she said quietly. "Or maybe he did. I don't know. I know he left for Denver with promises and came back as notification of debts. But then Jasper showed up 2 months ago with papers saying William owed him money, that the land was collateral. You think William's alive? I think William was always more alive for himself than anyone else. If he staged his death to escape debts, it wouldn't surprise me. If he sold his brother our land for gambling money, that wouldn't surprise me either." Sam was quiet for a moment. "The children don't know. The children know their father left and didn't come back. Whether he's dead or just dead to us, what's the difference?" Fair point. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sun climb higher. Finally, Eleanor spoke again. "I can't stay here, Sam. People will talk. People always talk. It's different for a woman, especially with children. Your reputation, my reputation." Sam almost laughed. "I'm the crazy hermit who talks to horses and shoots at shadows. Having company might actually improve what people think." "Sam, be serious." He turned to her, then fully his expression intense, as that young sergeant who'd refused morphine for others' sake. "I am being serious. You need somewhere to stay. Your children need shelter. Winter's not half over, and you've got nothing left but what you're wearing. I could go to town. Find work. With those hands, with no money, you think Sage Creek's going to welcome a woman whose brother-in-law died mysterious in the woods?" Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Then what do you suggest?" Sam looked back at the cabin where Thomas had his face pressed against the window, fogging it with his breath to draw pictures, where the twins were now trying to braid the patient dog's ears, where Clara stood in the doorway, watching them with those careful eyes. "Marry me," he said. Eleanor actually laughed short and sharp. "You're insane." "Probably, but think practical. It solves your housing problem, your reputation problem, your legal problem if William or more relatives show up. I get help with the ranch. I can't hear half of what needs hearing anymore. You get protection shelter legitimacy. That's not marriage. That's a business arrangement." "Isn't that what most marriages are?" Sam asked. "Seems to me the ones based on practical need last longer than the ones based on fever dreams and promises." Eleanor wanted to argue, but William's ghost stood between them, proof of Sam's point. "The children need stability, need to not worry about where they'll sleep or what they'll eat, need to see their mother safe." "And what do you need, Sam?" He was quiet so long, she thought he wouldn't answer. When he did, his voice was rough as tree bark. "I need voices in this house again. I need reason to keep the fire going past survival. I've been a ghost for 5 years, Eleanor. Your children, they're alive in a way I'd forgotten existed. And you. What about me? You saved me once. Maybe it's my turn." Eleanor looked at this man she'd known for 4 days, 13 years ago, this stranger who'd carried her from death, who'd saved her children from a bear, and worse. She thought about practical things. The ranch was solid. The man was decent. The protection was real. Then she thought about impractical things. The way he'd fed her at breakfast, the gentleness in his damaged hands, the way he looked at her children like they were miracles instead of burdens. "It wouldn't be real," she said. "The marriage. Not at first. Maybe not ever. Real as it needs to be. Separate rooms if you want. Your children, your rules. I'm just offering safety." "Why?" Sam smiled, then sad and crooked. "Because 13 years ago, a girl who sang hymns wrong gave me a reason to live when I didn't have one. Because I came home to empty graves and spent 5 years wishing I'd died at Gettysburg instead." Because your children looked at me in that cave like I was salvation instead of the broken thing I am. Because maybe Eleanor Hayes were both owed something better than what we've had." Before Eleanor could respond, Clara stepped onto the porch. "Mama," she said carefully. Thomas knocked over the water bucket, and Rose cut her foot on a piece of broken cup, and Mr. McBride's dog is eating something dead it brought in, and Ruth is crying because she's scared. Eleanor and Sam looked at each other, then back at Clara. Also, Clara continued studying them both with those gray eyes that missed nothing. "If you're discussing what I think you're discussing, we should stay. Mr. McBride has books I haven't read, and a warm house, and he killed a bear for us. That's more than most men would do." Clara Jane Hayes. Eleanor started, but her daughter interrupted. "I know what people will say, Mama, but people were going to say things anyway. We're already the weird family whose house burned down. Might as well be the weird family that survives." Sam knelt down to Clara's height. "It would be a big change." "Change already happened," Clara said simply. "Our house is gone. Our things are gone. Uncle Jasper is gone. But we're not gone. And you're not gone. And Mama says you find family where you can, not where you expect." Eleanor felt tears threatening. "When did I say that?" "When Ruth asked why we didn't have grandparents like the other kids. You said family isn't just blood, it's choice. It's who shows up when the world burns down." Sam stood, slowly looked at Eleanor. "Smart girl. Gets it from her mother." "So," Clara asked impatiently, "are we staying?" Eleanor looked at her daughter, at Sam, at the cabin where chaos was apparently unfolding, at the mountains that rose like promises or threats depending on the light. She thought about William's betrayal, Jasper's violence, the fire that had taken everything but what mattered most. Then she thought about Sam's steady presence, his quiet strength, the way he'd walked into darkness to bring back her children. "3 days," she said finally. "We'll stay 3 days. Then we'll see." Sam nodded. 3 days. But they all knew even then that 3 days would become 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. Some meetings were chance, others were choice, but some, the rare ones, were both. A chance that became a choice, that became a chance at something neither broken soul had thought possible. As they went inside to deal with spilled water and cut feet and dead things the dog had brought home, none of them noticed the rider watching from the tree line, a man with William Hayes's face but harder eyes who'd come to claim what he'd sold to his brother, only to find his brother dead and his wife sheltered by a ghost from his own past. The story, it seemed, was far from over. The 3rd day came with a blizzard that sealed them in like fate's own signature. The wind howled angry enough to shake the windows, and snow fell so thick you couldn't see the barn from the house. It was the kind of storm that made decisions for you, that said staying or leaving wasn't up for debate anymore. Eleanor stood at the window, watching the white nothing outside, her bandaged hands wrapped around a cup of coffee. The children were scattered around the main room, Clara reading one of Sam's books on animal husbandry, Thomas whittling a piece of wood into something that might be a horse, the twins playing with corn husk dolls Sam had somehow produced from a trunk. "Storm will last 3 days at least," Sam said, coming up beside her. He smelled like pipe tobacco and wood smoke, comfortable smells that made the cabin feel safer than it should. "Convenient," Eleanor said dryly, "right when I was supposed to decide about leaving. Weather doesn't care about our plans." "No, but it seems to have opinions about them." Sam almost smiled. "You always this suspicious of coincidence." "I've learned to be. Good things don't just happen, Sam. There's always a cost." "Maybe. Or maybe sometimes the world just gets tired of taking from people." Before Eleanor could respond, Thomas called out from his spot by the fire. "Mr. Sam, why don't you hear good?" Thomas. Eleanor scolded, but Sam raised his hand. "It's a fair question." He sat down next to the boy, gestured to his left ear. "Got too close to a cannon during the war. The sound broke something inside that never healed right." "Does it hurt?" "Not anymore. just makes the world quieter than it should be." "Maybe that's not bad," Clara said, looking up from her book. "The world's pretty loud sometimes." "That's true enough," Sam agreed. "But you miss things too. Good things, like your mother singing." "Mama sings terrible," Ruth announced cheerfully. "Ruth Ann," Eleanor protested, but she was fighting a smile. "It's true," Rose confirmed. "Remember when you tried to sing us that lullaby and Mr. Peterson's dog started howling? That was coincidence." 3 nights in a row, Clara asked innocently. Sam watched this family banter with something like hunger in his eyes. Not the desperate kind, but the way a man dying of thirst might watch rain. Eleanor caught him looking, and something passed between them, quick as lightning, warm as summer. That's when the knock came. 3 sharp raps that cut through wind and conversation like gunshots. Everyone froze. Nobody visited during blizzards. Nobody could. Sam moved to the door, rifle in hand, smooth as water. He opened it, careful just a crack, then wider. Sheriff Ben Lowry stood there, ice in his beard badge, gleaming despite the storm. Behind him, barely visible through the snow, were 2 more shapes on horseback. "Sam," the sheriff said, voice careful. "Mind if we come in? It's colder than a witch's heart out here." Sam stepped aside. The sheriff entered, followed by Mayor Carlton Hughes, a pompous man who owned half of Sage Creek, and Reverend Michael Stone, whose presence made Eleanor's stomach drop. "Mrs. Hayes," the sheriff said, removing his hat. "Glad to see you're alive." There were concerns. Concerns. Eleanor stood straighter, despite her injuries. "Your brother-in-law's body was found. What was left of it? Bear attack, looks like, but there are questions about how he ended up so far in the woods." "I wouldn't know," Eleanor said evenly. "I was unconscious from the fire he set." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious accusation, ma'am." "It's a serious truth." Mayor Hughes cleared his throat. "Regardless of past events, we're here about present circumstances. Mrs. Hayes, you're residing with an unmarried man, with children present. The town council has concerns about propriety." "The town council," Eleanor said slowly, "is concerned about propriety. The same council that did nothing when Jasper Hayes harassed me for 2 months, that looked away when he threatened my children. Those were allegations," the mayor said stiffly. "This is fact. You're living in sin." "I'm surviving," Eleanor shot back. "Or is that not allowed for widows?" Reverend Stone stepped forward, his face kind but firm. "Eleanor, nobody questions your virtue or your circumstances, but think of the children. Think of what example." "I am thinking of my children," Eleanor interrupted. "I'm thinking of keeping them warm and fed and alive. If that offends the town's sensibilities, perhaps the town should have helped when I needed it." "We're trying to help now," the Reverend said. "There's a widow's cottage behind the church, small but proper. You could stay there until spring." "A shack," Sam said flatly. "You mean the shack where you store old hymnals? No insulation, barely a roof, and no way to heat it proper in this weather." "It's appropriate housing," the mayor insisted. "It's a death sentence in this storm," Sam replied. The sheriff looked between them all, clearly uncomfortable. "There is another option." Everyone waited. "You could marry. Now. Today. Reverend Stone is here, I can witness. Makes everything proper and legal." Eleanor felt the room spin slightly. "You can't be serious." "I'm entirely serious. Look, Mrs. Hayes, I don't care personal what you do, but I've got a town ready to riot about moral decay and fallen women and God knows what else. Either you leave, which in this storm means you and those children die, or you marry McBride here and make it respectable." "This is extortion," Eleanor said. "This is reality," the sheriff replied. "I'm sorry it's come to this, but Jasper Hayes had friends. They're asking questions. A marriage certificate answers most of them." Sam stepped forward. "Sheriff's right." Eleanor turned on him. "You're agreeing to this? I'm agreeing to keeping you and your children safe and fed. The rest is just paperwork. Paperwork that binds us for life." Life's shorter than you think, Sam said quietly, and lonelier than it needs to be. The room went silent except for the wind. Clara stood up, walked to her mother, took her bandaged hand carefully. "Mama," she said quietly, "sometimes we do things we don't want to do because they're right anyway." Eleanor looked at her daughter, this child who'd led a man to his death to save her siblings, who understood necessity better than any 9-year-old should. "And if Mr. McBride turns out like your father," Eleanor asked, not caring who heard. It was Sam who answered. "Then you take the rifle down from that wall and you shoot me yourself. I'll even show you where it's loaded," the sheriff coughed. "That's not exactly legal to say in front of a lawman." "Neither is forcing a woman to marry," Sam replied. "Yet here we are." Mayor Hughes puffed up. "Nobody's forcing anything. We're offering options." "Two options," Clara said clearly. "Die in the cold or marry. That's not options, that's a threat with manners." "Young lady," the mayor started, but Thomas interrupted. "Our house burned down and you didn't come. Mama was hurt and you didn't come. We were hungry and you didn't come. But now you come. When she's safe. That seems backwards, mister." Even the twins chimed in. "We like it here," Ruth said. "It's warm," Rose added. "And there's a dog." Reverend Stone knelt down to their level. "Children, this is about what's proper in God's eyes." "God saw our house burn," Clara said flatly. "He saw Uncle Jasper try to hurt us. He saw Mr. McBride save us. Seems like God's already picked a side." The adults exchanged glances. Finally, Eleanor spoke. "If we do this, it's a business arrangement, nothing more." "That's between you and McBride," the sheriff said. "Long as it's legal, I don't care if you sleep in separate counties." Eleanor looked at Sam, really looked at him, saw the steadiness there, the quiet strength that didn't need to announce itself, saw how he stood between her and the men without seeming too protective, without being possessive, saw how her children had already started moving around him like he was furniture, comfortable, reliable, safe. "You understand what you're offering?" she asked him. 4 more mouths to feed, 4 more backs to clothe, 4 more souls, depending on me not to fail them. "That's what you're taking on." "What are you getting?" Sam considered. "Noise, chaos, probably arguments about chores, and definitely complaints about my cooking. Questions I don't know how to answer, and problems I've never had to solve." "That doesn't sound like much of a bargain." "Doesn't it?" Sam asked. "I've had 5 years of quiet Eleanor, 5 years of everything in its place and no one to move it. 5 years of cooking for one and talking to horses because humans required too much effort. You want to know what I'm getting? I'm getting life back in this house. Maybe that's worth more than peace." The wind rattled the windows, reminding them all that nature was waiting for an answer. Eleanor turned to her children. "This affects you too. Should we stay?" Thomas nodded immediately. "Mr. Sam has tools and lets me use them." The twins hugged her legs. "Stay, Mama." Clara, always Clara with the hard questions, asked, "Will you be happy?" Eleanor couldn't answer that. Happiness seemed like a luxury she'd lost the right to when William left, when Jasper burned everything, when the world showed its teeth. "I'll be safe," she said finally. "We'll be safe. Sometimes that's enough." "No," Sam said suddenly. Everyone looked at him. "Safety's not enough. Not for this." He walked to the trunk in the corner, pulled out a small wooden box. From it, he took a ring, simple silver, with a single small pearl. "This was my mother's," he said. "She wore it for 40 years of marriage. 30 of those years my father was gone, war work, wandering. But she wore it anyway. You know what she told me? She said, 'Samuel, love isn't always about being together. Sometimes it's about choosing to wait. Sometimes it's about choosing to hope.'" He held the ring out to Eleanor. "I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not asking for anything except the chance to prove that not all men leave. Some stay, some fight, some learn to love what they never expected to find. Eleanor felt tears burning her eyes. Sam. Marry me, Eleanor. Not because they're making you. Not because of the storm. Marry me because 13 years ago you gave me a reason to live, and I've been waiting ever since to return the favor. The room was silent, except for the wind and the soft breathing of children. Even the sheriff seemed affected, clearing his throat roughly. Finally, Eleanor took the ring. It fit perfectly, like it had been waiting. "Reverend," she said, not looking away from Sam's eyes, "I believe you have a ceremony to perform." What happened next was both the simplest and most complex wedding in Sage Creek's history. Simple because it was just words spoken in a cabin while snow raged outside. Complex because every word carried weight. Children's futures, adults' pasts, promises made to ghosts, and hopes offered to strangers. Clara stood as Eleanor's witness. Thomas stood as Sam's. The twins held the family Bible Sam had kept but never opened. When Reverend Stone asked if anyone objected, the wind howled so loud it shook the roof, but nobody inside spoke. "Do you, Samuel McBride, take Eleanor Hayes to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do. I will. I have since Pennsylvania." "Do you, Eleanor Hayes, take Samuel McBride to be your lawfully wedded husband?" Eleanor looked at her children, at Sam, at the men who'd forced this moment, but not this choice. "I do. God help us both, I do." When Sam kissed her gentle as morning light, Clara whispered to Thomas, "Mama's crying." Good crying or bad crying? Clara watched her mother's face, saw something there she hadn't seen since before their father left. "I don't know yet, but it's real crying. That's something." As the witnesses left fighting through the storm back to town, the new family stood awkward in the cabin. Married strangers with children between them, bound by law and storm, and something neither adult wanted to name yet. "Well," Sam said finally, "I guess we should figure out sleeping arrangements." "You're giving us your bed," Eleanor stated. "Already moved my things to the barn." "The barn, Sam. You can't. It's warm enough. Got a cot out there for when I'm watching sick calves. Done it before." "This is your house." "It's our house now," Sam corrected. "But you need the bed to heal. The children need their mother close. I need time to adjust too." Eleanor wanted to argue but saw the wisdom in distance, at least at first. "Thank you." "Don't thank me yet. Wait until you've survived my cooking for a week." "Mama's cooking isn't much better," Thomas offered helpfully. Thomas James. But Sam laughed, actually laughed, and the sound was rusty but real, like a door opening after years of being shut. That night, as the storm raged and the children slept in their new home, Eleanor lay awake thinking about choices and chances. In the barn, Sam lay awake thinking the same. Between them, snow fell like promises or threats, depending on what tomorrow would bring. But for tonight, they were married. They were safe. They were taking the first steps on a path neither had planned to walk. And somewhere in the darkness, Clara whispered to the twins, "I think Mama made the right choice." "How do you know?" Ruth asked. "Because Mr. Sam looks at us like we matter. That's more than most people do." The storm continued for 3 more days, sealing them all in together, forcing them to learn each other's rhythms, habits, needs. By the time it cleared, they weren't a family yet, but they were something. Something that might, with time and trust and a little hope, become more than any of them had dared imagine. The first morning after the storm cleared dawned bright enough to hurt. Sun on snow created a world of diamonds, beautiful and blinding in equal measure. Sam came in from the barn to find chaos. Thomas had spilled molasses on the floor and was trying to clean it with hay, making it worse. Ruth had decided to help by washing dishes and had used all the soap, a month's worth, in one go. Rose was crying because she'd torn her only dress on a nail. Clara was trying to manage everything while Eleanor, still weak from her injuries, attempted to make breakfast with bandaged hands. Sam stood in the doorway, melting snow pooling at his feet, watching this domestic disaster with something between horror and fascination. "Morning," Eleanor said, not looking at him, frustration clear in her voice. "The stove won't draw. Right, the porridge is burned, and I think your dog ate something dead again because he's been sick behind the woodpile. Also," Thomas added cheerfully, "the outhouse door is frozen shut, so I peed behind the barn." "Thomas," Eleanor and Clara said in unison. Sam felt the urge to retreat back to the barn to the simple problems of cattle and horses. Instead, he did something that surprised everyone, including himself. He laughed. Not a small chuckle, but a real deep laugh that filled the cabin. "This is funny to you?" Eleanor asked, but her lips were twitching. "It's just—" Sam wiped his eyes. "I spent 5 years keeping this place so ordered you could eat off any surface. Now look at it. It's destroyed in one morning." "We can leave," Eleanor said stiffly, pride flaring. "No," Sam said quickly. "No, that's not what I meant. It's alive again. Messy and loud and completely insane, but alive." He walked to the stove, adjusted the damper with practiced ease. The smoke stopped billowing into the room. He took the burned porridge, scraped off the top layer, added milk and a little sugar, saved it. He showed Thomas the right way to clean molasses, with warm water, not hay. He got Rose his sewing kit, helped her patch the dress proper. "You know how to sew?" Eleanor asked, surprised. "Bachelor for 5 years. Learn or go naked." Mr. Sam said naked. Ruth giggled. "That's enough, Ruth," Eleanor said, but she was fighting a smile. They developed a rhythm over those first days, awkward as newborn colts, but trying. Sam woke first, built up the fires, started coffee. Eleanor managed breakfast once her hands healed enough. Clara helped with everything, her serious nature making her a perfect lieutenant. Thomas followed Sam like a shadow, asking endless questions. "Why do horses sleep standing up? How come water expands when it freezes? If God made everything, who made God?" That last one made Sam pause in his fence repair. "Your mother asked me the same question once." "When? Long time ago. During the war." "What did you tell her?" "That maybe God is the question, not the answer." Thomas considered this. "That doesn't make sense." "Most important things don't." Eleanor watched these interactions from the window while she worked on mending clothes with her slowly healing hands. Sam was patient with Thomas in a way William never had been. He answered every question seriously, never brushed the boy off, never told him to stop pestering. When Thomas helped with chores, usually making them take twice as long, Sam just adjusted teaching without seeming to. The twins were harder for Sam to understand. They operated as a unit, finishing each other's sentences, creating games only they knew the rules to. But they'd taken to following him during his evening rounds, small shadows chattering in their peculiar twin language. One evening, he found them in the barn, trying to climb into the loft. "That's dangerous," he said, his damaged hearing making him speak louder than necessary. They looked at him with identical solemn eyes. "We wanted to see the owl," Ruth said. "The white one," Rose added. "It lives up there," they said together. Sam lifted them up, one on each arm, so they could peek into the loft. Sure enough, a snowy owl sat on a beam, majestic and still. "It's beautiful," Ruth whispered. "Like an angel," Rose added. "Owls aren't angels," Sam said. "They're hunters. Silent killers." "Still beautiful," the twins said together. Sam found himself agreeing. Beautiful and deadly weren't opposites. He'd learned that from Eleanor, who could stitch wounds gentle as a lamb and defend her children fierce as a wolf. It was Clara who remained distant. She watched Sam, constantly evaluating, judging. She helped with chores, but never chatted. She answered questions, but never asked them. She was protecting her mother, Sam realized, standing guard against another man who might disappoint. The test came 2 weeks in. Sam had gone to town for supplies, leaving Eleanor and the children alone. When he returned near sunset, he found Eleanor crying at the kitchen table, a letter crumpled in her hands. "What happened?" He set down his packages, concerned. Eleanor handed him the letter wordlessly. It was from a lawyer in Denver. William's debts, significant ones, had been discovered. As his widow, she was responsible. How much? Sam asked. $800, more than I could make in 5 years. Sam read the letter carefully. Then he walked to his bedroom, came back with a leather wallet. He counted out bills. $900. Sam, no, I can't. You're my wife. Your debts are my debts. In name only. This isn't your responsibility. Eleanor, he said quietly, what good is money sitting in a wallet when there's need sitting at my table? I'll pay you back. No, you won't. You'll help run this ranch. You'll keep teaching these children to be decent people. You'll make this house something more than walls and a roof. That's worth more than money. Eleanor stood, abruptly walked to the window. I don't understand you. What's to understand? Men they don't just give. There's always a cost. Always something expected. Sam was quiet for a moment. Then he said, my father beat my mother every Saturday night for 20 years, regular as clockwork. She never said a word against him. When I asked her why she stayed, she said, because that's what women do. When I joined the army, I swore I'd never be him, never take what wasn't offered, never hurt what I was supposed to protect. He moved to stand beside her at the window, careful not to touch. I'm not William Eleanor. I'm not Jasper. I'm not even the man I was before the war. I'm just someone trying to be better than his worst day. That's all I can offer, trying. Eleanor turned to look at him, then really look at him, saw the exhaustion he carried like a second skin, the loneliness that had carved lines around his eyes, the hope he was afraid to admit to. The children are getting attached to you, she said softly. Is that bad? It's dangerous. If you leave, I won't. Everyone leaves Sam. Death or choice, everyone leaves. Then I'll be the exception. Before Eleanor could respond, Thomas burst through the door. Mr. Sam, the fence broke and the cattle are out, and Mrs. Henderson's bull is in with our cows, and there's gonna be trouble. The next hour was controlled chaos. Sam and Thomas herding cattle while Eleanor and Clara mended fence. The twins appointed themselves supervisors, shouting unhelpful directions from the porch. Mrs. Henderson herself showed up furious about her bull being led astray. That's a $2,000 bull, she screeched. Then you should keep him penned better, Sam replied calmly, leading the enormous animal back toward her property. Don't you tell me how to manage my stock, Samuel McBride. Wouldn't dream of it, ma'am, just suggesting that good fences make good neighbors. Is that a threat? It's a Robert Frost poem, Eleanor interjected, appearing with hammer in hand. Though he won't write it for another 40 years. Everyone looked at her. I mean, it's just common sense. Mrs. Henderson huffed, but took her bull home. As she left, she called back, Heard you got married sudden-like. We did, Sam confirmed. Heard it was forced by circumstance. Many marriages are, Eleanor replied steadily. Well, Mrs. Henderson said, her tone softening slightly, my Harold and I married because my father caught us in the barn. 40 years later, we're still arguing about that bull. Sometimes circumstance knows better than we do. After she left, the family stood looking at the repaired fence in the gathering dusk. We make a good team, Thomas announced. When we're not disasters, Clara added. Even disasters can be good teams, Sam said. Just ask the cavalry. That night after dinner, something shifted. Instead of Sam immediately leaving for the barn, he stayed. Eleanor was teaching the twins their letters, while Clara read, and Thomas whittled. Sam sat in his chair, working on harness repairs existing in the same space without awkwardness for the first time. Mr. Sam, Rose asked suddenly, why don't you sleep inside? The adults froze. The barn's warmer, Sam said carefully. No, it's not, Ruth said. We checked. You went to the barn to see the owl and to see where you sleep, Rose added. And Eleanor asked, curious despite herself. It's sad, the twins said together. Just a cot and a lantern and that picture. What picture? Eleanor asked. Sam's jaw tightened. Just an old photograph. Of your family, Clara said quietly. She'd been to the barn too, apparently. Your wife and little boy. Eleanor felt her heart contract. Sam. It's fine, he said, standing abruptly. I should check the animals. He left quickly, grabbing his coat as he went. Eleanor looked at her children. That wasn't kind, she said. We didn't mean to be mean. Ruth said, tears starting. Sometimes, Eleanor said gently, we hurt people by looking at wounds they're not ready to show. She found Sam in the barn, standing by his cot, holding the photograph. It was water-stained edges worn from handling. A pretty woman with kind eyes and a small boy with Sam's serious expression. They were beautiful, Eleanor said softly. They were everything. I'm sorry, the children. They're curious. It's natural. He set the photograph down carefully. Some nights I forget what Mary's voice sounded like. Then I panic trying to remember, but I can't. The deafness took that too. Eleanor moved closer, close enough to see his hands trembling slightly. Tell me about her. Why? Because she was important to you. Because she should be remembered. Because... Eleanor paused. Because I think you need to. So Sam talked. Told her about meeting Mary at a church social, her laugh that could fill a room. How she'd waited for him through the war writing letters he still had. How James had been born while he was gone. How he'd missed his first steps, first words. How the cholera had come faster than anyone expected. How he'd buried them in the rain because the sun seemed wrong for such darkness. I thought about following them, he admitted. Had the gun loaded and everything. Then I remembered what you'd said in that hospital. About owing the living more than the dead. So I came here instead. Been half alive ever since. Until, Eleanor prompted. Until I found you in the snow. You and those children. Suddenly, I had a reason to do more than exist. Eleanor reached out, touched his scarred hand. We're not replacements for them, Sam. I know, you're not meant to be. You're different. They were my past. You might be something else. Might be. Sam turned his hand over, laced his fingers through hers. I'm scared, Eleanor. Scared to hope. Scared to care. Scared those children will look at me like a father, and I'll fail them. You're already not failing them. How do you know? Because Thomas talks about you constantly. Because the twins trust you enough to sneak into your space. Because Clara, who trusts no one, is starting to watch you with something other than suspicion. And you, Sam asked. What do you watch me with? Eleanor considered lying, making it easier. But this man had paid her debts, taken in her children, given her his mother's ring. Possibility, she said finally. I watch you with possibility. They stood there in the barn, hands linked, while the owl hooted softly above and the cattle shifted in their stalls. Finally, Eleanor spoke again. Come inside, Sam. Sleep on the couch if you must, but come inside. Be part of this family you're building. What if? No what ifs, just come inside. So he did. Gathered his few things, including the photograph, which Eleanor placed carefully on the mantel next to a sketch Clara had drawn of their old house. The past and present side by side, neither erasing the other. That night, Sam slept on the couch, but he slept inside. The children crept out one by one to check as if making sure he hadn't disappeared. By morning, Thomas had joined him, curled against his side like a puppy. The twins had built a blanket fort underneath. Clara sat in the chair nearby, keeping watch. Eleanor found them like that at dawn, her children surrounding this man who'd been a stranger just weeks ago. She thought about William, who'd never let the children close because they were too loud. About Jasper, who'd seen them as property. About Sam, who looked uncomfortable but hadn't moved, letting Thomas drool on his shirt rather than disturb the boy's sleep. Good morning, she whispered. Sam opened one eye. Is it? She looked at her children, safe and warm. At this man who'd taken them in without question. At the home they were building from ashes and accidents. Yes, she said, surprising herself with certainty. I think it actually is. Outside, the sun rose over the Medicine Bow Mountains, painting the snow pink and gold. Inside, a family that wasn't quite a family yet began another day of trying to become one. There would be more spilled molasses, more escaped cattle, more awkward moments of not knowing how to be together, but they would try. And in the trying, something unexpected would grow. Not love, not yet, but the framework for it, the possibility of it. And for people who'd lost everything, possibility was its own kind of miracle. Spring came to Wyoming like a reluctant bride, slow and uncertain melting snow, revealing the bones of winter. Dead grass, lost tools, the charred remains of Eleanor's old cabin visible from the ridge. It had been 3 months since the marriage, and Sage Creek had been watching. The first test came on Easter Sunday. Eleanor had avoided town except for necessities, but Easter demanded presents. Sam hitched the wagon while Eleanor dressed the children in their best mended clothes. Clara wore her mother's cut-down blue dress, Thomas in Sam's old shirt, tailored to fit the twins in matching calico that Eleanor had sewn from fabric Sam mysteriously produced. "You don't have to come," Eleanor told Sam as he put on his rarely worn Sunday coat. "We're married. I come. People will stare. Let them. They'll whisper. They always have." Eleanor touched his arm. "This is different, Sam. Before you were just the hermit on the mountain. Now you're the man who married the scandalous widow." Sam adjusted his hat, looked at her straight. "Now I'm the man who married Eleanor Hayes. If that's scandalous, then I'll be scandalous." The ride to town was quiet, except for Thomas asking if God lived in the church or just visited on Sundays. Sam's answer, "God lives wherever people need him most," earned him a surprised look from Eleanor. "Didn't know you were philosophical. Lots you don't know about me yet." "That's true," she admitted. "Sometimes I feel like we're strangers who happen to share a house." "We are," Sam said simply, "but strangers can become friends. Friends can become more." "Can they?" Before Sam could answer, the church came into view. People were gathered outside their Sunday finest, creating a patchwork of color against the white clapboard building. Conversation stopped as their wagon approached. Eyes tracked them. Whispers started before they'd even stopped. "Look at her bold as brass." "Those poor children." "McBride looks different, almost normal." "Forced marriage, I heard." "Sheriff made them." Eleanor kept her head high, helped the children down. Sam came around, offered his arm. She took it, feeling the solid strength of him, the way he positioned himself between her and the worst of the stairs. They entered the church like running a gauntlet. Every pew turned to watch. Some faces were curious, some hostile, a few sympathetic. Mrs. Henderson nodded slightly, approval or acknowledgement, hard to tell. The mayor's wife turned away entirely. They sat in the back, children between them like a small barrier. Reverend Stone began his sermon on redemption and second chances, his eyes finding them repeatedly. Eleanor wondered if he'd chosen the topic deliberately. Halfway through the service, Rose announced loud enough for 3 rows to hear, "I have to pee." The word echoed. Several ladies gasped. Someone's fan fluttered faster. "I'll take her," Clara whispered, mortified. But Sam stood instead. "I'll go." The entire congregation watched Sam McBride, notorious loner, carry a 5-year-old girl out of church because she needed the outhouse. Eleanor heard the whispers explode behind them. "Well, I never." Acting like a real father. "It's not proper. It's sweet." That last voice belonged to Emma Patterson, the schoolteacher. Young, unmarried, arrived from Connecticut the previous year. She smiled at Eleanor, the first genuine warmth she'd felt from anyone besides Mrs. Henderson. After the service, Eleanor steeled herself for the social gauntlet, but before the worst gossips could corner her, Emma appeared at her elbow. "Mrs. McBride," she said deliberately, using the new name. "I've been hoping to meet you properly. I hear your Clara is quite the reader." "She is," Eleanor said carefully. "I have books she might enjoy." Would you mind if I brought some by? Before Eleanor could answer, the mayor's wife, Constance Hughes, inserted herself into the conversation. Miss Patterson, you should be careful about the company you keep. Your reputation is my own concern, Emma said sweetly, as is my choice of friends. Constance's face reddened. Well, I suppose standards are different in Connecticut. Yes, Emma agreed. We judge people by their actions, not their circumstances. The verbal slap was so polite, it took Constance a moment to realize she'd been insulted. By then, Emma had steered Eleanor away toward where Sam stood with the children. That was brave, Eleanor said. That was necessary. This town needs shaking up. Emma looked at the children. Will you be enrolling them in school? Eleanor hesitated. I wasn't sure they'd be welcome. They're welcome in my classroom. Education doesn't care about gossip. Clara, who'd been listening, stepped forward. Could I really go to school? Of course. All of you can. Thomas groaned. Do we have to? Yes. Eleanor and Sam said simultaneously, then looked at each other surprised by their unified response. Emma smiled. See, you're already acting like parents. As they prepared to leave, an unexpected voice called out, McBride. They turned to find Judge Lyle Wharton approaching, the judge who'd ruled in Eleanor's favor against Jasper. He was a stern man, gray-bearded, respected, and feared equally. Judge, Sam acknowledged. Heard you got married. We did. The judge studied them both, then looked at the children. His expression softened slightly. My Martha passed last winter, he said quietly. 40 years married. The house echoes now. I'm sorry, Eleanor said, meaning it. Don't be sorry. Be smart. Time's shorter than we think. He looked at Sam. You served at Chancellorsville. It wasn't a question. Sam nodded. So did my boy. Didn't come back. You did. The judge paused. Make it count, son. Make it count. He walked away before they could respond, but his public acknowledgement had been seen. If Judge Wharton accepted them, others might follow. The ride home was different. The children chattered about school, about Miss Patterson, about whether God really lived in the church or not. Eleanor found herself relaxing for the first time all day. You did good with Rose, she told Sam. She's 5. When a 5-year-old says they need the outhouse, you move fast. William would have been mortified, made her wait. William was an idiot, Sam said bluntly. Eleanor laughed, surprised. You didn't know him. I knew enough of him. He left you. He left them. That tells me everything. That evening, as Eleanor tucked the twins into bed, Ruth asked, Are we real McBrides now, or pretend McBrides? Eleanor sat on the bed's edge. What do you mean? Well, our name changed. But did we change? Do you want to be McBrides? Rose answered. Mr. Sam doesn't yell. And he lets us pet the horses, Ruth added. And he fixed my doll, Rose continued. And he smells like outside not whiskey, they said together. Eleanor's throat tightened. Children noticed everything, remembered everything. Then I guess you're real McBrides. The next morning brought another test. A letter arrived from Boston. Eleanor's Aunt Margaret, her mother's sister. The handwriting alone made Eleanor's hands shake. Sam found her crying at the kitchen table an hour later. What's wrong? She handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his jaw tightening with each line. My dearest Eleanor, it began. Word has reached Boston of your circumstances. Married to a war-damaged rancher after your husband's death. Living in squalor with 4 children. Have you no shame your mother would roll in her grave? However, Christian charity compels me to offer assistance. Send the children to me. I will raise them properly, give them education and standing. You've proven yourself unfit. Don't condemn them to your poor choices. Passage is arranged. Send them on the next Eastern train. Aunt Margaret. Sam set the letter down carefully. She wants to take the children. She wants to save them. From me. From this life. From you. What do you want? Eleanor looked up, tears streaming. I want to tell her to go to hell. Sam blinked, then laughed. Then tell her. It's not that simple. She's right about some things. They could have better in Boston, education society opportunity. They could have different, not better. How is this better? Eleanor gestured around the simple cabin. Sam sat down across from her. Clara come out from behind the door. You too, Thomas. The children emerged guilty but defiant. You were listening, Eleanor said. We were worried, Clara replied. You were crying. Sam looked at them. Your aunt in Boston wants you to come live with her. Fancy house, fancy schools, fancy life. Thomas immediately said no. You didn't even think about it. Don't need to. She's mean. You don't know her. Clara stepped forward. We know she called Mama unfit. That's enough. But the opportunities, Eleanor started. Mama Clara interrupted her 9-year-old voice, carrying the weight of someone much older. We've been hungry, cold, scared, and hurt, but we've never been unwanted. Not by you. And not, she looked at Sam, not by Mr. Sam either. Sam's breath caught. Clara had never acknowledged him so directly. You want us here, right? Thomas asked Sam. Sam looked at each child, then at Eleanor. I want you here, all of you, but it's not my choice alone. Ruth and Rose had crept out of their room, drawn by voices. Are we leaving? Ruth asked. No, Thomas said firmly. We're not going to mean Aunt Boston. Boston is a place, not a person, Clara corrected. Don't care, not going. Eleanor looked at her children, united in rebellion, then at Sam, steady and sure. Help me write a letter, she said to him. They composed it together at the kitchen table while the children played around them. It was short and clear. Dear Aunt Margaret, thank you for your concern. However, my children and I are neither in need of rescue nor separation. We have a good home, honest work, and a community that, while small, is teaching us the value of perseverance. My husband, Samuel McBride, is a decorated war veteran and successful rancher who treats my children as his own. We are not living in squalor, but in simplicity, which I've learned is not the same thing. The children will be educated here, loved here, and raised here. They will learn to work hard, love deeply, and judge less. Perhaps those are lessons Boston could use as well. With regards, Mrs. Eleanor McBride, P.S. My mother would not roll in her grave. She would understand that sometimes we must choose between propriety and survival. I choose survival. Sam read it over. Suggested one addition. P.P.S. Should you wish to visit and see for yourself, you are welcome. We have room, if not luxury. Eleanor looked at him. You'd welcome her here. After this letter. Family is family, even difficult family. Besides, he smiled slightly. I'd like her to see what we're building. That afternoon, Emma Patterson arrived with an armload of books. She stayed for coffee, charming the children with stories about her students. As she prepared to leave, she pulled Eleanor aside. There's something you should know. William's name has come up in Denver. He's alive, Eleanor, living under the name Wilson Hayes, married to a banker's daughter. Eleanor felt the world tilt. Married. For 2 years, apparently. Which means his marriage to me was still valid. His new marriage is bigamous. Eleanor laughed sharp and bitter. He abandoned us and committed crime doing it. I thought you should know, in case he tries to make trouble. After Emma left, Eleanor told Sam. He listened quietly, then said, Do you want me to find him? Why? To make him pay. Literally. Child support, abandoned wife support, whatever the law allows. Eleanor considered. No, let him have his new life. We have ours. You're sure? I'm sure, but Sam, this means our marriage might not be fully legal. If William's alive. Sam stood, walked to his desk, pulled out papers. Judge Wharton thought of that. Had these drawn up last week. Divorce papers for abandonment and new marriage papers properly filed. All they need is signatures. Eleanor stared at the papers. You knew. I suspected. William always seemed the type to run rather than die, so I prepared. Without telling me, would you have worried if I had? Yes. Then I saved you worry. Sign the papers, Eleanor. Make it real. She signed. As she did, Thomas called from outside, Mr. Sam. The fence broke again. Sam sighed, grabbed his tools. That boy attracts chaos. Sam. Eleanor called. He turned. Thank you for the papers, for the letter, for everything. We're family, he said simply. Family takes care of each other. That evening, as they all sat around the dinner table, Sam inside now part of the circle, Clara raised her cup of milk. A toast, she said seriously. Everyone raised their cups, even the twins with their half-spilled ones. To the McBride family, Clara said. Weird, loud, and ours. To the McBrides, everyone echoed. Later, after the children were asleep, Eleanor found Sam on the porch, smoking his pipe and watching the stars. We're building something, she said, sitting beside him. Seems so. It's not what I expected. Life rarely is. She was quiet for a moment. Do you ever regret it? Taking us in, Sam turned to look at her. In the moonlight, his face was all shadows and silver, but his eyes were warm. Every morning I wake up to Thomas asking impossible questions. The twins have named all the chickens and cry when we eat one. Clara judges my every decision like a tiny Supreme Court justice. Your aunt thinks I'm trash. The town thinks we're scandalous. I haven't had a quiet meal in 3 months. Eleanor's heart sank. So you do regret it? No, Sam said softly. I'm grateful. Every loud, chaotic, impossible moment. Because for 5 years I woke up to silence. Now I wake up to life. Eleanor felt something shift in her chest. Not love, not yet, but the possibility of it growing stronger. Sam, yeah, we're going to be all right, aren't we? He took her hand, rough fingers gentle around hers. We're going to be better than all right, Eleanor. We're going to be a family. Above them, the stars wheeled in their courses. Below them, the ranch spread out in moonlight. And between them, something unnamed but real began to take root. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The judge's son would arrive looking for work. Emma would start a campaign to get Eleanor accepted by the church ladies. William would send a letter that would shake everything. But tonight they sat on their porch, watching their land, planning their future, building their unexpected family one day at a time. And in the house behind them, 4 children slept sound, knowing they were home. July came to Wyoming with a vengeance that year, bringing the kind of heat that made the grass crack underfoot and turned the creek to a trickle. The drought had started subtle in June, just a few weeks, without rain, nothing to worry about. By mid-July, the land looked like old leather and the cattle were getting thin. Sam stood at what used to be the creek, now just damp stones and dying fish. Thomas stood beside him, no longer the chattering boy of spring. The drought had taught him silence. Is it going to rain, Mr. Sam? Eventually. But not soon. No, son, not soon. They'd started calling each other father and son without meaning to. It just happened one day when Thomas introduced Sam to his friend at school. This is my pa, he'd said, then looked horrified. Sam had just put his hand on the boy's shoulder and said, this is my son. Neither had spoken of it since, but the words had stuck. Eleanor was rationing water at the house, every drop precious. The garden she'd planted with such hope was dying despite their efforts. The twins carried buckets from the well to the vegetables twice a day, but it wasn't enough. Nothing was enough. We need to talk, Sam said that evening, after a dinner of beans and the last of the preserved meat. Eleanor looked up from her mending. The children were already in bed, exhausted from the heat. How bad? Bad. We've got maybe 3 weeks of water for the cattle, less if it gets hotter. Can we buy water rights from Henderson? She's in the same situation, worse actually. Her well's going dry. Eleanor set down her sewing. What do we do? There's water up in Devil's Canyon. Spring-fed doesn't dry, but what? It's Shoshone sacred land. They don't take kindly to cattle up there. Can we negotiate? Sam was quiet for a moment. Maybe. Their chief Joseph Crow Feather is reasonable, but his son Marcus lost family to settlers. He won't be easy to convince. When do we try? Tomorrow. But Eleanor. Sam paused. I need you to come with me. Me, why? Because you saved 3 Shoshone children from fever last spring. They remember. They call you the woman who fights death. Eleanor remembered. 3 children burning with scarlet fever brought to her in desperation by their grandmother when the tribal medicine wasn't working. She'd used every trick she knew, stayed awake 3 days straight. All 3 had lived. That was just being a nurse. To them, it was more. The next morning, they left Claire in charge of the younger ones and rode toward the mountains. The heat was oppressive, making the horses labor. Eleanor had never been to the Shoshone camp, though she'd heard stories, some romantic, some terrifying, most probably false. What she found was neither romantic nor terrifying. Just people living in lodges arranged in careful circles, children playing despite the heat, women working hides, men tending horses, and everywhere the same signs of drought. Thin animals, worried faces, rationed water. Chief Joseph Crow Feather was younger than Eleanor expected, perhaps 40, with eyes that missed nothing. His son Marcus stood beside him, hand on his knife, distrust radiating from every line of his body. Samuel McBride, the chief said in perfect English, the silent rancher and the woman who fights death, you honor us with your visit. Sam removed his hat. Chief, we come asking for help. Your cattle are dying. They are. You want Devil's Canyon water? We do. Marcus spoke, then his voice sharp with old anger. That canyon is sacred, where our ancestors speak. You would bring your spotted cattle to shit in our holy place. Marcus, the chief, warned. No, father, these whites take everything. Land, buffalo, water. Now they want our sacred spaces too. Eleanor stepped forward. You're right. Everyone looked at her. We have taken too much, done too much harm. I can't change that. But right now, we're all fighting the same enemy. This drought doesn't care if you're white or Shoshone. It's killing everything. Your point, Marcus asked. My point is, maybe we help each other. You need medicine for your elderly. I have some. You need preserved food for when the hunting fails. We have some. You need ammunition for hunting. We have that too. And you need water, the chief said. We all need water, but you have access to some. We are proposing a trade. The chief was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke in Shoshone to his son too fast for Eleanor to catch any words. Marcus responded angrily, gesturing at them. The argument continued for several minutes. Finally, the chief raised his hand for silence. 3 days. You may water your cattle in Devil's Canyon for 3 days. In exchange, you will provide medicine and ammunition as promised. And, he paused, the woman who fights death will come if our children sicken. Always, Eleanor said immediately. Drought or no drought. They shook on it, the chief's hand dry and strong. As they prepared to leave, Marcus called out, Your boy, the one who asks many questions. He was here yesterday. Eleanor and Sam exchanged alarmed looks. Thomas was here, Sam asked. He wanted to learn about rain dances. Said if he learned he could make it rain for everyone. I'm sorry if he bothered. He didn't bother, Marcus interrupted. He listened, really listened. Few white children do that. He paused. Tell him the dance worked. Rain is coming. When? Sam asked. Marcus smiled slightly. When it's ready. They rode home to find chaos, not the usual kind with spilled milk and broken fences. Real chaos. Judge Wharton's carriage was in the yard. Emma Patterson's horse was tied to the post, and standing on their porch was a man Eleanor hadn't seen in 4 years. William Hayes. Alive, well-dressed, and smiling that smile that had once made her young heart flutter and now made her stomach turn. Hello, Eleanor, he said casually, like he'd been gone 4 hours instead of 4 years. You're looking well. Sam dismounted first, moving between William and Eleanor in one smooth motion. "You're trespassing," Sam said quietly. "On my own land? I don't think so." William produced papers from his coat. "See, I never actually died, which means I never actually abandoned my property, which means this ranch, which you've improved so nicely, belongs to me." "Your debts say otherwise," Judge Wharton interjected from the doorway. $800 paid by Mr. McBride, which I'm prepared to repay, with interest." William pulled out a bank draft. $1,000, more than fair. "You abandoned your family," Emma said, her teacher's voice sharp with disgust. "I left to find fortune. I found it. Now I'm back to claim what's mine." "You remarried," Eleanor said, finding her voice. "You have another wife." "Had. The marriage was annulled once she learned I was previously married. Seems her daddy didn't like bigamy. But that's resolved now. I'm free to reclaim my family." "We're not your family anymore," Clara said from the doorway, her voice cold as winter stone. The other children clustered behind her. William's smile faltered for a moment. "Clara, sweetheart, don't call me that. You left us. We nearly died. Mr. Sam saved us. I'm your father." "No." Thomas stepped forward. "You were our father. Mr. Sam is our pa now." William's face darkened. "You've poisoned them against me." "No," Eleanor said, moving around Sam. "You poisoned them against you when you left, when you let us starve, when you chose money over family." "I choose family now. That's why I'm here." With a sheriff's deputy, Sam noticed the man lingering by the carriage. "That's not choosing family. That's claiming property." The deputy stepped forward. "Mr. Hayes has legal right to his children, his land, and his wife, if she'll have him." "She won't," Eleanor said firmly. "Then I'll take the children and the land," William said. "The law's on my side." Judge Wharton cleared his throat. "Actually, the law is complicated here. Mr. Hayes did abandon his family. Mr. McBride did pay the debts. There was a marriage, albeit under questionable circumstances." "Which makes it invalid," William argued. "Does it Mrs. Hayes, Mrs. McBride believed you dead. She remarried in good faith. You, however, remarried while knowing your wife lived, who acted illegally." "I'm taking my children," William said, dropping all pretense of charm. "No." The twins screamed, running to Sam, clinging to his legs. "You can't," Thomas shouted. Clara stood firm. "We won't go." William started toward them, but Sam's hand on his chest stopped him cold. "Touch them, and I'll kill you," Sam said quietly. "That's not a threat. It's a promise." "You heard him," William told the deputy. "He threatened me." The deputy looked uncomfortable. "Maybe we should let the court decide." That's when they heard it. Thunder, distant but real. Everyone looked up. Clouds were building over the mountains, dark and heavy with promise. "Rain," Ruth whispered. "The dance worked," Thomas said in wonder. Marcus was right. The first drops fell as they all stood frozen in that tableau, William grasping for what he'd thrown away, Sam protecting what he'd chosen, Eleanor standing between her past and future, the children clinging to the only real father they'd known. Then the sky opened. It didn't just rain. It poured, sheets of water that turned the yard to mud in minutes. Everyone ran for cover except Sam and William, who stood facing each other in the deluge. "You want to take them?" Sam shouted over the rain. "You'll have to go through me." "You're not their father. I'm the one who stayed." William swung first his fist, connecting with Sam's jaw. Sam staggered but didn't fall. They fought in the mud and rain, not with guns or knives, but with fists like men had since the beginning of time, fighting for family, for rights, for the future. Eleanor watched from the porch, the children pressed against her. She could stop this, should stop this. But something primal in her understood this needed to happen. These two men, representing two different choices she'd made, needed to settle it. Sam was stronger, work-hardened, and grief-strengthened. But William was desperate, fighting with the fury of a man who'd realized too late what he'd lost. They rolled in the mud, throwing punches that splashed water, grappling for dominance. Finally, Sam got William pinned arm across his throat. "Yield," Sam growled. "Never. They're mine. They're not property. Yield or I'll break your arm." "Sam," Eleanor called. "Don't. He's not worth it." Sam looked at her reins streaming down his face, mixing with blood from a cut above his eye. In that moment, she saw him fully. Not the broken man who'd saved them, not the silent rancher who'd married them, but the warrior who'd survived hell and chosen to love anyway. He released William stood, offered his hand to help him up. William slapped it away, struggled to his feet alone. "This isn't over," William said. "Yes, it is," Judge Wharton said from the porch. "Deputy, arrest Mr. Hayes." "On what charge?" "Bigamy, fraud, abandonment. Take your pick." "You can't." "I can, and I will. Mr. Hayes, you abandoned your family for 4 years. Mr. McBride has been their father for 4 months, but in those 4 months, he's done more for them than you did in 4 years. Any judge with sense will see that. Including you. Especially me." The deputy led William away, still protesting, still claiming rights he'd forfeited long ago. As his carriage disappeared into the rain, the family stood on the porch, soaked and shaking. "Inside," Eleanor ordered. "Everyone, now." They stripped off wet clothes, wrapped in blankets, huddled by the fire. Sam's eye was swelling shut. His knuckles were raw. Eleanor tended his wounds while the children made hot cocoa. "You fought for us," Clara said quietly to Sam. "Always will. Even though we're not yours." Sam looked at her, this too serious girl who'd seen too much. "Clara, you became mine the day you stood in front of that bear to protect your siblings. Thomas became mine when he asked his first impossible question. The twins became mine when they named my chickens. Your mother." He looked at Eleanor. "She became mine when she chose to stay." "And you?" Eleanor asked. "When did you become ours?" Sam smiled, wincing at his split lip. "The day I found you in the snow. I just didn't know it yet." Outside, the rain continued filling creeks, soaking the ground, saving the land. The drought was broken. William was gone. The family was safe. But Eleanor knew this wasn't the end. William would be back, if not in person then, in lawyers and legal challenges. The town would gossip about the fight. The children would have questions. That night, after the children were asleep, she found Sam on the porch watching the rain. "Thank you," she said. "For what? Fighting for us?" "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." Her heart sank. Here it came, the regret at the second thoughts. "I love them," Sam said simply. "Your children. Our children. I love them like they were born from my own blood. And you." "What about me?" Sam turned to her, his battered face serious in the lamplight. "I'm falling in love with you, Eleanor, not because I saved you, not because we're married, but because you're the strongest, stubbornest, most amazing woman I've ever known. And if William tries to take you or those children, I'll fight him and anyone else who tries." Eleanor felt tears mix with the rain on her face. "Sam, you don't have to love me back. Not yet. Maybe not ever. But I needed you to know. Before whatever comes next." Eleanor looked at this man who'd taken them in, fought for them, bled for them, who'd gone from stranger to husband to friend to whatever came next. "I'm falling too," she whispered. "Slower than you maybe, but falling just the same." They sat together in the rain, not touching but connected, watching the drought end and something new begin. Tomorrow would bring challenges, legal battles, town gossip, the complications of a blended family. But tonight the rain fell, the children slept safe, and 2 broken people sat on a porch, admitting they might not be broken forever. The crisis had come in forms they hadn't expected, not just drought, but the past returning to claim its due. They'd survived both. More than survived. They'd fought and won. And in the winning, they'd finally truly become a family. The trial was set for the first week of September, when the aspens were just starting to turn gold on the mountainsides. William had spent 2 months in the county jail, his fancy clothes replaced with prisoner gray, his smooth-talking charm worn down to desperate anger. He'd hired a lawyer from Denver, expensive and sharp, who'd come to Sage Creek like a wolf smelling blood. Eleanor stood in their bedroom, trying to button her best dress with shaking hands. Sam appeared in the doorway, already in his court clothes, the same suit he'd worn to their forced wedding, now carrying different meaning. "Let me," he said quietly, moving to help with the buttons. His fingers were gentle, careful. The past 2 months had changed them both. They'd moved from separate beds to shared glances to just last week, their first real kiss. It had happened while bringing in the harvest, both covered in wheat dust, the children laughing in the field. Sam had looked at her with such joy that she'd simply leaned in and kissed him, right there in the daylight, where God and everyone could see. "You're nervous," Sam observed. "He could win. He could take them. He won't. You don't know that." Sam finished the last button, turned her to face him. His eye had healed from the fight, leaving just a small scar. It made him look dangerous in a protective way. "I know that Clara's been keeping a journal of everything. Every night William didn't come home, every empty belly, every broken promise. I know Thomas has been practicing what he'll say for a week. I know the twins have drawn pictures of our family, and you're in everyone, and William's in none. Children's testimony doesn't always matter to judges. It matters to Judge Wharton, his grandson told me." Eleanor looked up sharply. "His grandson, Daniel. The one who came to work for us this summer, Judge Wharton's grandson. You never said, would it have mattered? He's a good hand. Works hard. The judge visits, sometimes watches how we are with the children. He's already decided, Eleanor. This trial is just formality." They arrived at the courthouse to find it packed. The whole town had turned out eager for drama. Emma Patterson sat in the front row, having closed school for the day. Mrs. Henderson was there with her husband, their faces stern but supportive. Even Chief Joseph Crowfeather had come, bringing Marcus and several other tribal members. "Why are they here?" Eleanor whispered. "To speak for us," Sam replied. "About the water rights negotiation, about character." William's lawyer, Mr. Cornelius Sharp, stood like a vulture in an expensive suit. William sat beside him, clean-shaven and trying to look respectable. He'd lost weight in jail, his soft edges worn away to show the desperate man beneath. Judge Wharton entered his robes, making him look like an Old Testament prophet. He surveyed the packed courtroom and began. "We're here to determine custody of 4 minor children and ownership of property. Mr. Sharp, you may begin." Sharp stood smooth as oil. "Your Honor, the law is clear. William Hayes is the biological father of these children. He never legally died, never legally abandoned them. He left to seek fortune to better provide for his family. He succeeded and returned to find his wife remarried and his children turned against him. We seek restoration of his parental rights and his property." "Mr. McBride," the judge asked. Sam had refused a lawyer, choosing to speak for himself. Sam stood slowly. "Your Honor, I'm not good with fancy words, but I know what I've seen. I've seen a woman near death in the snow, begging me to save her children, not herself. I've seen 4 children huddle in a cave with a bear, rather than go with the man who burned their home. I've seen empty bellies and broken hearts that I didn't cause but chose to heal." He paused, looked at William. "Mr. Hayes talks about biology, but any bull can sire a calf. It takes something more to be a father. It takes showing up when they're sick, teaching them to read even when you can barely hear their questions, letting them cry on your shoulder when they miss their real father, even when that hurts to hear." "Objection," Sharp said. "Emotional manipulation." "Overruled," Judge Wharton said. "Continue, Mr. McBride." "I'm not asking for anything I haven't earned. Every meal cooked, every fever tended, every nightmare soothed. Mr. Hayes had 4 years to be a father. He chose gold instead. I've had 6 months. I chose them instead." "Your Honor," Sharp interjected, "Might we hear from the children?" The judge nodded. "Clara Hayes, please come forward." Clara walked to the witness chair with the dignity of someone twice her age. She carried her journal. Clara Sharp began with a patronizing smile. "You must miss your real father." "I don't miss someone I never really had," Clara replied evenly. "Surely you have good memories." "I have memories. Would you like to hear them without waiting?" She opened her journal. December 15th, 1872. Papa came home drunk again. Hit Mama when she asked for money for food. December 23rd. Papa lost our Christmas money at cards. We ate beans for Christmas dinner. January 10th, 1873. Papa left for Denver. Said he'd be back in a week. Came back in 3 months with empty pockets and whiskey breath. "That's enough," Sharp said. "No," Clara continued. March 5th, 1873. Thomas sick with fever. Papa said to keep him quiet or he'd give him something to really cry about. April. I said that's enough. "Let her speak," Judge Wharton ordered. Clara looked directly at William. "You weren't a father. You were a burden we carried. Mr. Sam is a father. He reads to us even though hearing is hard for him. He taught Thomas to whittle and the twins to ride. He holds Mama when she cries about the fire. Real fathers stay." She stepped down and walked past William without looking at him. Thomas was next. He stood in the witness chair, feet swinging. "Son," Sharp said, "wouldn't you like to know your real father?" "I know him," Thomas said. "He's sitting right there." He pointed at Sam. "He's the one who taught me why water freezes, who let me help with calving even when I messed up, who sang to the twins when they had nightmares, even though he sings terrible." The courtroom chuckled. "But Mr. Hayes is your blood." "Mr. Sam bled for us," Thomas interrupted, "when he fought the bear, when he fought the fire to save our things, when he fought Papa Mr. Hayes in the rain. Blood don't make family. Choice does. And we choose Mr. Sam." The twins testified together, holding hands. "Mr. Hayes scary," Ruth said. "Mr. Sam safe," Rose added. "Mr. Hayes left. Mr. Sam stayed." We draw pictures," they said together, producing crumpled papers from their pockets. "See, this is our family." The drawings showed 5 figures holding hands, a tall man labeled Papa Sam, a woman labeled Mama, and 3 smaller figures. No William anywhere. Then came the surprise witnesses. Chief Joseph Crow Feather stood. "This man," he pointed at Sam, "negotiated with honor during the drought, shared water, shared resources. His family helped heal our children. A true father protects not just his own, but his community." Mrs. Henderson testified about seeing Sam teach the children about watching Eleanor bloom from frightened widow to confident mother under his protection. Emma Patterson read letters from her students about how the McBride children had changed since Sam became their father. Thomas more confident, Clara less severe, the twins no longer crying in class. Finally, Daniel Wharton, the judge's own grandson, testified. "I've worked for Mr. McBride all summer. I've seen him get up 3 times a night to check on sick calves. I've seen him spend his last dollar on shoes for the children. I've seen him put himself between danger and this family more times than I can count. That's what fathers do." Sharp made one last attempt. "Your Honor, surely blood relations." "Mr. Sharp," Judge Wharton interrupted, "I lost my own son in the war. Blood relations mean nothing if the blood runs cold. Mr. Hayes, please stand." William stood defiant still. "You abandoned your family. That is fact. You remarried illegally. That is fact. You attempted to reclaim them only when convenient. That is fact. But here's the most important fact. These children fear you. They fear you more than they feared a bear, more than they feared fire, more than they feared starvation. No child should fear their father." He turned to Sam and Eleanor. "Mr. and Mrs. McBride, please stand." They stood, hands linked. "Samuel McBride, you took in strangers and made them family. You bled for children not your own. You gave when you had little to give. Eleanor McBride, you survived abandonment, attempted murder, and public shame with dignity. You've raised remarkable children under impossible circumstances." He paused, looked at the packed courtroom. "It is the judgment of this court that William Hayes has forfeited all parental rights through abandonment. The children shall remain with Samuel and Eleanor McBride. Furthermore, Mr. Hayes shall pay restitution of $50 monthly for the next 10 years for child support never provided. The property claim is dismissed as the land was legally transferred to satisfy debts. Mr. Hayes, you are also sentenced to 1 year in state prison for bigamy and fraud." The gavel came down with finality. William lunged forward. "You can't do this. They're mine." The deputies restrained him as he shouted, "Eleanor, you'll regret this. You all will." But Eleanor wasn't listening. She was holding Sam, both of them crying as their children. Their children surrounded them. Clara trying to be strong, but crying anyway. Thomas whooping with joy. The twins dancing in circles. Outside the courthouse, the town gathered around them. Congratulations, handshakes, even apologies from those who judged too harshly. But Sam pulled the family away from the crowd toward their wagon. "Let's go home," he said simply. As they drove out of town, Thomas asked, "Are we really safe now, forever?" Sam looked at Eleanor, who looked at their children, then back at him. "Nothing's forever," Eleanor said honestly. "But we're safe for now, and we're together. That's enough." "More than enough," Sam added, pulling her closer on the wagon seat. Clara, ever practical, asked, "What do we call you now? Mr. Sam seems wrong." Sam's breath caught. "Whatever feels right." The twins looked at each other, then said in unison, "Papa." Thomas nodded. "Papa Sam, or just Pa?" Clara was quiet for a moment, then said softly, "Dad. I'd like to call you Dad." Sam had to stop the wagon. He sat there, reins in his hands, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I never thought—" He started, then stopped. Yes, I'd like that very much." They drove home through aspens, turning gold, past fields, ready for harvest, toward mountains preparing for winter. The ranch looked different somehow. Not bigger or better, just more theirs. That evening, as they sat around the dinner table, the table Sam had eaten at alone for 5 years, he raised his coffee cup. "To family," he said. "To family," they echoed. "To second chances," Eleanor added. "To third chances," Clara corrected. "Or fourth, however many it takes." "To Papa fixing the roof tomorrow," Thomas said, "because it's leaking over my bed." Everyone laughed. Real laughter, not the careful kind they'd been doing, but the kind that came from relief and joy, and the knowledge that they were finally legally truly home. That night, Eleanor came to Sam's, their bedroom, without hesitation. They lay together, not as strangers bound by necessity, but as husband and wife who'd chosen each other. "We did it," she whispered. "We did. William's gone. For a year at least. The children are safe. Our children." Eleanor propped up on an elbow, looked at him in the moonlight. "Sam McBride, I love you." He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. "Say it again." "I love you, not from gratitude, not from necessity. I love your stubborn silences and your terrible singing. I love how you let Thomas ask impossible questions and how you braid the twins' hair all wrong. I love that you fought for us when you didn't have to." "Eleanor," he said against her neck, "you saved me first. In that field hospital, you gave me a reason to survive. Then you saved me again from 5 years of being a ghost. I loved you before I knew you. I just had to wait to find you again." They held each other as the house settled around them, full of sleeping children and promise. Tomorrow would bring work. Always work on a ranch. Winter preparations, school, challenges, the normal chaos of raising 4 children. But tonight, they were complete. A family forged in fire and drought, tested by law and blood, and proven by choice. The past was gone. William to prison grief, to memory, fear to courage. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, but no longer frightening. And the present, this moment, This breath, this heartbeat, was perfect. They were home. 5 years later, spring of 1881, the ranch had transformed into something neither Sam nor Eleanor could have imagined that desperate winter night when she collapsed in the snow. The single cabin had grown to include a second building connected by a covered walkway necessary when Eleanor's medical practice expanded and she needed a proper clinic. The barn had doubled in size, the cattle herd tripled, and a new schoolhouse sat on the corner of their property, a gift to the community that had finally fully embraced them. Today was special. Today, Clara was getting married. At 14, she wasn't marrying, of course, but she was standing as maid of honor, while Emma Patterson married Daniel Wharton in the meadow behind the ranch, surrounded by wildflowers and the entire population of Sage Creek. It had been Clara's idea to host the wedding here, her way of showing that the McBride Ranch was no longer a place of scandal, but of celebration. Sam stood adjusting his tie for the 10th time while Eleanor laughed at him. "You're more nervous than when it was our wedding," she teased. "Our wedding was different. We were desperate. This is happiness. Pure happiness. It makes me nervous." Eleanor moved to help him with the tie, her hands sure and steady. At 37, she'd grown into her beauty. The lines around her eyes from laughter now not worry. Her medical practice had flourished, especially after she'd successfully treated a diphtheria outbreak that could have decimated the town. "Do you remember," she said softly, "when you thought happiness was impossible? I remember thinking survival was enough. And now..." Sam looked out the window, where Thomas, now 12 and taller than his mother, was helping set up chairs with the Crow Feather boys. The twins, 10 and inseparable as ever, were braiding flowers into Emma's hair while she laughed at their chatter. "Now I know better. Survival is just the beginning. Living, really living, that's the miracle." A knock at the door interrupted them. Clara entered lovely in her blue dress, but her face was serious. "There's a wagon coming," she said, "from the east." Sam and Eleanor exchanged glances. Unexpected wagons rarely brought good news. They went out together, the whole family gathering on the porch as the wagon approached. It was fancy city fancy with matched horses and a painted side. When it stopped, a woman emerged, elderly proper, dressed in Boston black, despite the Wyoming heat. Aunt Margaret. Eleanor hadn't seen her mother's sister in 15 years. The woman looked older, grayer, but still carrying herself like Queen Victoria's cousin. "Eleanor," she said, her voice exactly as Eleanor remembered, cultured and cutting. "Aunt Margaret, you came. You invited me 5 years ago. I finally decided to see what became of my sister's daughter." Margaret's eyes swept over the ranch, the children Sam, the wedding preparations. Eleanor waited for the criticism, the judgment, the "I told you so." Instead, Margaret's composure cracked slightly. "You look well." "I am well." The children. "Come meet them properly." One by one, Eleanor introduced her family. Clara poised and intelligent, discussing her plans to study medicine. Thomas confident and curious, immediately asking Margaret about Boston's libraries. The twins no longer shy, chattering about their horses and their chicken business that Sam had helped them start. "And this is my husband Samuel," Eleanor said finally. Sam stepped forward, offered his hand. Margaret studied him for a long moment, the scars, the weathered face, the work-roughened hands. Then she did something unexpected. She took his hand in both of hers. "Thank you," she said simply, "for saving them when I couldn't." The wedding proceeded as planned. Emma radiant in cream lace, Daniel handsome and nervous. Judge Wharton performed the ceremony, his eyes twinkling as he said, "I've married couples under worse circumstances," with a wink at Sam and Eleanor. During the reception held under lanterns strung between trees, Margaret found Eleanor standing apart watching the celebration. "You didn't become what I expected," Margaret said. "I know. I'm not a proper Boston lady." "No, you became something better. You became yourself." Eleanor looked at her aunt surprised. Margaret continued, I spent my life following rules, maintaining appearances, doing what was expected. I have a beautiful house, a respected name, and no one who would miss me if I died tomorrow. She watched the twins teaching other children their mysterious twin language. You have a ranch in the middle of nowhere, a scandal-touched name, and 100 people here celebrating your family's joy. Aunt Margaret. I was wrong, Eleanor. Wrong to judge, wrong to try to take the children wrong about everything that matters. She pulled out an envelope. This is my will. Everything goes to your children when I pass. It's substantial. They can go to university, travel, have choices. We can't accept you can and you will, because those children are magnificent, and that's not because of blood or Boston breeding. It's because you and that scarred cowboy love them through hell and back. As the sun set, painting the mountains gold and pink, Sam found Eleanor by the creek, finally alone. Overwhelming, he asked, pulling her close. Perfect, she corrected. All of it. They stood, watching their children dance with the other young people, Thomas attempting to waltz with the Henderson girl, the twins creating their own wild spinning dance, Clara helping serve cake with the gravity of someone performing surgery. We have another one coming, Eleanor said quietly. Sam went still. Another what? Another child, I'm certain now. Due in winter. Sam turned her to face him, his eyes wide. Eleanor, a baby. Our baby. Our baby. Yours and mine. Blood and choice combined. He kissed her, then deep and sure, not caring who saw. When they broke apart, both were crying and laughing simultaneously. After all this time, Sam said wonderingly, I thought, after Mary, after losing James, I thought I'd never. I know. After William, after everything, I thought my body had forgotten how. But life finds a way, Sam. It always finds a way. Judge Wharton called for attention, then raising his glass for a toast. But instead of toasting the bride and groom, he turned to Sam and Eleanor. 5 years ago, he said, his voice carrying across the meadow, this town witnessed something it didn't understand. A desperate woman, a solitary man, and 4 frightened children forced together by circumstance. Many of us judged, some of us gossiped, most of us doubted. He paused, looked directly at them. We were wrong. What we witnessed wasn't desperation, but destiny. Not circumstance, but choice. This family born from ashes and snow has taught us that love isn't just about blood, or proper courtship, or doing what's expected. It's about showing up, when showing up is hard. It's about choosing each other again and again, especially when that choice costs everything. He raised his glass higher. To the McBrides. To second chances and third chances and as many chances as it takes. To the family that proved that sometimes the best things come from the worst circumstances. The crowd cheered, glasses raised, voices carrying across the valley. Sam and Eleanor stood surrounded by their children, Clara already planning the baby's education, Thomas wondering if it would be a boy, to even out the numbers, the twins arguing over who would teach it to ride first. As the stars came out brilliant in the clear Wyoming sky, Eleanor thought about that night 5 years ago. The fire, the snow, the fear that her children would die. The desperation that led her to Sam's door. Do you ever wonder, she asked Sam, what would have happened if things had been different? If William hadn't left? If Jasper hadn't burned the cabin? If you hadn't found us in the snow? Sam considered, then shook his head. No, because all those things, terrible as they were, led us here. Every broken piece had to break exactly as it did to create this wholeness. Aunt Margaret approached them one last time before retiring for the evening. Your mother, she told Eleanor, used to say that God writes straight with crooked lines. I never understood that until today. She looked at this family created from loss, strengthened by trial, celebrated by community. This is the straightest line I've ever seen drawn from the most crooked path imaginable. As the wedding party continued into the night, Sam and Eleanor walked back to their house, their home, hand in hand. Through the windows, they could see the quilts. Eleanor had made the furniture. Sam had built the books they'd collected, the life they'd constructed piece by careful piece. "I love you," Eleanor said, words that still felt like miracles after years of saying them. "I love you too," Sam replied. "All of you, all of this, every impossible, beautiful bit of it." Above them, the stars wheeled in their courses, indifferent to human struggles and triumphs. But below them, in a ranch house in Wyoming, a family that shouldn't exist thrived. A woman who'd lost everything had gained more. A man who'd forgotten how to live had remembered. Children who'd faced abandonment had found belonging. And in Eleanor's womb, new life grew, not to replace what was lost, but to add to what was found. Another chance, another choice, another proof that sometimes the universe breaks us not to leave us broken, but to let the light in through the cracks. The West had always been about redemption, about leaving the past behind and building something new from prairie dust and mountain stone. But Sam and Eleanor had learned something more, that redemption wasn't about forgetting the past, but about transforming it. Every scar, every loss, every moment of desperation had become part of their foundation, making them stronger than they ever could have been unbroken. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. The baby would come in winter when Wyoming showed its teeth. The ranch would face droughts and floods. The children would grow up, make their own mistakes, find their own loves. William might return from prison, though word was he'd headed further west, finally learning to leave well enough alone. But tonight, in this moment, in this place, they'd carved from wilderness, and Will the McBride family was complete. Not perfect. Perfection was for fairy tales and fools, but whole. Beautifully, impossibly, defiantly whole. And that Eleanor thought, as she felt the baby move for the first time, the tiniest flutter of future hope, that was the real message of their story. Not that love conquers all. Sometimes it doesn't. Not that everything happens for a reason. Sometimes terrible things just happen. But that broken people can choose to heal together. That families can be built from anyone brave enough to stay. That the West, for all its harshness, had room enough for every kind of redemption. The coyotes sang in the distance, their voices wild and free. The wind moved through the aspens like whispered promises. And in the McBride house, 5 people who'd started as strangers settled in for the night, no longer bound by desperation, but by something stronger. The choice to be family again and again, forever and always, until the mountains themselves crumbled to dust.